For the sake of the tape, I'd like to welcome everyone to the 40th Annual CALLERLAB Square Dance Convention. Today is Tuesday, March 26th, 2013, and this is the intercession on Choreo Build-up. My name is Ted Lizzotte. I'll be your moderator today, and joining me are our distinguished panelists, Tim Marriner, Bob Worley, and Tak Ozaki. As your sheets have mentioned, I'll just reiterate, this session is going to present information about building the difficulty of choreography, as we call. The panel will discuss how to start with easy or standard choreography and add a little difficulty, moving toward extended applications and going from there. This can be done in a single sequence, a single tip, a full dance, or a workshop. Before I handed it over, just had a couple of ideas or a couple of things to talk about. I've sat through this before, and we as callers tend to take the extended applications area, I think, far too crazy sometimes as to where we're going. And so I thought I would start the conversation to discuss this more or less at a day one. What we really do when we talk about choreo build-up, this is something that you should really be doing from day one when you teach your class, right? You teach your class in a certain order. Part of it is what CALLERLAB gives you for the calls and the order that you're going to give them. But the other thing is you should be going over the presentation in your head as to why you're going to do something in a certain area at a certain time from a certain spot to try to understand it. I think it's very important to understand the pitfalls of the call before you get going, not only when you're teaching, but if you understand that as you're teaching, it's going to be better when you're actually getting out to the dance. And something that I always talk about, calling it like the TED scale. I'm going to be able to debate whether a call should be given at this point in time on a certain level as opposed to a different point in time, so that I can discuss or put in my mind a specific order where we're going to go. You can try all you want, it won't stop. Just keep spinning. Sorry, the thing. It's quieter up there. Tak and I already took a look at it. That's for the tape, though. Okay, anyways. So, for example, I thought I'd give just a little quickie. For example, say we take your right and left through. At the first class, I think, where do you teach that the first night? Where's your common setup, your formation? Probably a static square. And where would you do that? I always promenade them halfway around. Why do I do that? Because it's easier to go home in a couple's mind. I think that they understand the concept of being home. They may not exactly know how they're getting there, but we've already discussed a lot of things along the way, so that home is a spot that somebody understands. So to do a right and left through to home is easier than to do a right and left through to away from home. So I would always have them coming home first. The next thing that you're going to do with them, in my mind, is to do them from lines. Why? Because I'm dealing with 4 people without 4 people on the other side. I got 4 people on one side, they're alone, they're playing with themselves over on one side. They're going to do a right and left through and go by. They're going to have nobody in front of them. They're going to be able to turn that person, and they're going to be trading, and they know where they're going. Then I'm going to leave it alone a bit, and then maybe when we get back to the pass-through, and you've taught, depending on if you're actually following the CALLERLAB order, you've done a pass-through, you've done something else, maybe a California twirl. I tend to move things around. The next spot I'm going to do is either double pass-through or a trade-by formation. Why? Because that isolates the couple again to one couple in the middle. They're dealing with just their foursome, and it takes the others out of the picture. And if I had to argue a point which one I would do first, I would do a double pass-through first over a trade-by formation, because I think from a double pass-through formation, the couples on the outside can see what's going on, and if the people in the middle are having some trouble, they can back up, they can give them some room. They've got that ability to flex and help. As opposed to a trade-by formation, the 4 in the middle are on their own because the others have their backs to them, so they can't help, they can't adjust, and those people have to be alone. Next spot would probably be an 8-chain through formation, in my mind. And then from there, where would I go with that? Well, I would take the couple that's having trouble, I would put them on the inside instead of on the outside. Why? Because the couple coming in from the outside, that gentleman who gives that first right pull by, he's got two girls. He's got the one next to him he's supposed to be dealing with, but he's got another one staring at him in the face. And generally speaking, sometimes it's a lot easier to deal with the person that's coming at you, what you're looking at, and you've got eye contact with, than the person next to who you're supposed to be doing the call with. So if I'm already having trouble, I would put that person on the inside, so when they do their right pull by, there's nobody else. They have to play with the person that's next to them instead of the person in front of them. So without getting too much further into it, these are the kind of things that I think that every caller should go through for every particular call and be able to argue this point. You may not agree with me, and that's fine, but the fact that you've thought it through and found that path is going to then take that and extrapolate it through your dance, through your weekend, through wherever, and that's what the panel is going to kind of show you from here. So first up, we're going to go to Tim, and I think that mic should be on.
Check 1 2 2 2 2 2. All right. Hey, thanks, Ted. So, Ted gave a quick overview, and yes, we have a standard application booklet, and we all kind of have a familiarity of where or what standard applications are for those particular calls. As soon as you start changing the arrangements of the particular call, then you also are aware that the degree of difficulty will increase. And maybe that's your goal. Maybe the goal is to be able to do square through, for example, from with 4 boys or 4 girls. Maybe the goal is to then do it sashayed. Maybe the goal is to do it left-handed. But you have to set that goal and be aware of what that goal is in order for you to be able to take it degree by degree up to that point. And what's important is that you take it in little steps. You don't stand in front of an elephant and try to eat the whole thing. You've got to take it in pieces, right? So the idea here is in choreographic applications for building it up, you have to start somewhere, and usually the standard application is where you started. That's what we do in classes, after all. We start when we teach from a standard aspect, something, and then if we want to have the dancers be aware of some other arrangements, we can get them involved in maybe seeing some other arrangements of that particular call. And this could be something you're doing just in a class environment. You're going to definitely want to do it at your evening dances or your dances, wherever you're doing your dances. Sometimes this choreo build-up can happen in a matter of weeks, maybe for a whole season. It could be for a whole year. And choreo build-up, when you think about it, is exactly what we're doing when we teach classes. You know, so we just start with very fundamental calls, and we work our way up, and we start reinforcing the calls as we review. We're doing the same thing, though, if we're going to do some micro-programming within a tip, if we're going to specialize a call. And I like square through, for example. Let's just take square through. So we initially teach it, and I like to teach it where everybody's doing it, so I don't have to teach it twice. So I want to have an arrangement in an 8-chain setup or somewhere along that way where everybody can see the standard application of square through. And they learn it, and you teach it, you describe it. Now, the things that you don't want to do is give them crutches. You don't want to give them pitfalls that are going to give them difficulty of me being able to move up that degree of difficulty. A pitfall would be saying or giving some qualifying statements like the men turn right and the girls turn left on the action square through as you're going around. That would inhibit their ability to move up the degree of difficulty. So if you're in a situation where you're teaching, you have to be very specific and say you're looking in. If there's an additional hand, you have to go around the building and turn the corner and walk the next block and stay back to back and make sure at the end of the action, everybody will be looking out of the building. If you think about it in that term, that's what happens every time they dance square through. They're going to go around the building, however many blocks you ask, and they're looking out of the building at the end of the call, back to back with people that they played with. If you teach it that way, then it's not a rightness or leftness. You're showing the application or theory of what square through is. So you're giving them really good foundation so that the build-up can occur without it crumbling. So you wind up with teaching or showing the square-through action from that one setup, and then a formation in particular, or with an 8-chain setup, and then you're working your way around, telling them go around the building. I would then add some choreo build-up from there and say, okay, we do it from squared set. That has a different feel. And the heads can do it and the sides can do it. And then from there I might move on and say, well, let's do the heads roll away and see what happens if you're on the other side of the building. If you're on the other side of the building, you have to go around the building the other way, but it's okay. Keep walking around the building. Same definition applies. And then they'll dance it for you, and you'll have more success. What you don't want to do is to go to X degree of difficulty and try to teach that first, or go to a dance with a pre-written piece of get-out in mind and just call it right from the get-go, because you'll have very little success. So when you create choreography, sometimes you can sit down with checkers before a dance or before you get to the dance, and you're creating, and you can create modules and look at the degree of difficulty that you're building up to. Let's say you are going through the list one night and you go, boy, I need to do something a little different. I want to do some more creative choreography, and I want to use square through to a right and a left grand. Well, you can't create that piece of choreography with right and left grand get out at the bottom of the page, working your way up. You can create that choreography, but you just wouldn't want to call that the first tip. You have that goal in mind now, that I'm going to deliver that piece of choreography somewhere at my dance. Well, I'm going to now need to be able to be assured that before I deliver it, the dancers know how to do a sashayed square through, or a left-handed square through for that matter, or whatever it is, to get up to the point where I can deliver a square through 2 hands, which would be sashayed to the right and left grand. That means somewhere I have to re-educate them as I go along that journey to build up to get to that point. I'm not going to give that get out first thing out right out of the barrel, because the success rate would be pretty close to 0, right? But with my little baby steps, as we work it up the degree of difficulty, then I might use this nugget at the end of my dance, or just before, somewhere where I know I'm going to create this thrill of going to a right and left grand from a square through 2, and then I deliver that, and I'm going to have more success, hopefully, because that's what you've been building up to get to that place. And you can do that with just about every call on our program. Pardon me. You can take the call wheel around and say, oh, I don't use that a whole lot. Well, how would I utilize that more in my choreography? Me personally, I would take the Analyze a Call sheet that we have online available. I would go ahead and fill it out again, look at it, say, well, I know most of the times we use wheel-arounds on promenades. So I would start from there. Everybody promenade, heads or sides wheel-around. Okay, if you want to get really kinky, you'd have girls together, boys together, and girls wheel around or boys wheel around from that promenade, and you're working your way up a little bit again. Then I'd work myself into something that would flow very nicely into it. So I'd have a left-handed 2-face line I might call Ferris wheel, and I want the centers to wheel all the way around, and I use a little helper word to make sure that build-up happens properly. And I wheel all the way around and look, and hopefully to the corner, or maybe to the partner in front of me where I can swing her, something that has a very nice, easy get out. But I just wouldn't haul off and get 2-face lines and say outfacers wheel around, or double pass through and everybody wheel around. Okay, your success rate would be fairly much nil. But you work your way up, get some choreo build up, get to it, and you're going to have better success rates. And I realize that there are regional differences where abilities differ. In Europe, for example, where they dance a lot of positioning dances, your build-up might not start from a standard application. It might start somewhere further along, and maybe so same in Japan, and we'll ask TAC about that as we go. So just be aware that there are different degrees of difficulties regionally, and it's more difficult for a European caller or a Japanese caller or somebody from Australia to come to the U.S. and then know where that level of standard application is. And it's because over there it's a little higher in those regions. Here, what's written as standard is definitely standard. And you have to work your way up like milquetoast all the way further up to get something to have a good diet. So if you guys want to interject anyway, if you see any difference in such, or please.
おはようございます. Good morning, everybody. In Japan, I think I have a problem too. We have very, very strong language, problem over there. And for instance, the beginners class, we, Japanese callers have to explain this is right, left, and circle is like a circle. So we have to start up very, very first. So if I say circle left, you can do circle left just as you call circle left immediately. But I have to explain circle is like a circle, build up circle. Everybody join your hands and circle is like you made up circle. I have to explain what circle means. And go left is like just like your left way. Most Japanese use the chopsticks when they have a mead. So chopsticks mostly used by right hand. So those who so I said circle right is like just to go move toward the hand you just use the chopsticks with. And the left side, that's on the other way. That's just like clock moves. So we have to really explain the very, very first thing. So this is kind of a difficulty there, but the dancers are very, very how to say they could show. They also need to concentrate what the callers saying. So concentration is very good too in the Japanese dancers. So they learn with a strong concentration. So they're really doing acting very well. So we just callers start at the beginners class start teach with so-called standard application, as Tim says, but we don't know what standard application means. Just watch that list of CALLERLAB, and from the top, circle is like so explain like a circle, and the left and right is like a chopstick side, just chopsticks direction or the clock direction, something like that. So dancers are show very strong concentration, and they really listen, to the call. So it's just very good to us. So language barrier is very good on this kind of thing. So just callers teach standard application, but they also do not know what the standard means. So they just teach right on through just wherever they mostly they start with the square sets as Ted says, but they immediately go into lines of four, something like that, or some callers may teach like lines of 4 halves a shade and centers right on a throw. So mostly callers try to teach without thinking anything about the standard or non-standard extended.
Randy Doherty, related to Dee Dee Doherty. Tack, I'm from everywhere. Tack, I was wondering, when you do your teaching over there, do you use your language and then they have to learn phonetically the English things? So do you say circle in Japanese? And can you demonstrate how you would say circle in Japanese?
Yeah, circle is circle. Because it's showing the list. So, but the pronunciation is like a sakuru, something like that.
It's like what?
Sakuru.
So that's what the Japanese version of.
So Japanese explain what sakuru means in Japanese, but command it should be the circle. So this is So I'm kind of notorious over there to some kind of language barrier. My pronunciation is different, not Japanese, So it's kind of problem over there. They dance to me because I look like Japanese. I don't have any blonde hair, the blue eyes. So they just really expect like a sakura lefto, But I cannot say that, I just say like a circle left.
More like a Texas accent then.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I'm Carl Sims, and I taught, if you don't know, I taught Tack how to dance years ago. And something that you probably don't know, the L sound is not in the Japanese alphabet. And so that makes it difficult for them. And they roll their R's, so it's that's one of the problems that they have with that.
Thank you, Carl. He's a father of Japanese square dancing. When I was about to graduate university, I joined his beginners class. But fortunately, at that time, we have only 30 calls. Just before Baba Osgood set up 51 movements, so it was very lucky over there. But I also kind of in betweener between Carl and Japanese square dances, and I really had a hard time to explain what he says to Japanese square dances, since I just learned how to speak English at school, but when I just went to his class, he spoke with strong raw accent in English, and he really did not know how they speak in the social life, because I learned how to speak English at school from Japanese teachers. So I really did not have time to interpret his explanation at his class, because he has a very strong Texas accent at that time, which I did not learn at the school. But anyway, so some callers teach right on a through from half shaded lines of facing, but the others don't. So we have a much class ability difference there. So we have to think about this to call a dance at the mostly festivals and the parties. So my case, as I said, I have a language barrier. I'm not a Japanese So to them, I'm just I was just a funny caller over there, because I talk different language over there. So they really did not want to dance to me, because I say circle left instead of circle left, or so I really had a hard time there. So when I just received that email from Dana, I just returned back to him saying like I don't know if I'm right person or not. So he did not give me any tag over here saying a panelist, but I just try to do my best over here. So whatever you need to ask me, please be free to ask me. I think you need to talk to me sometimes in Japanese, though.
Bob Worley. And Tack, I can understand what your problem is. I grew up in North Georgia. I've been away from North Georgia for about 40 years. Now when I go back and go into the stores or visit around, I hear things like, y'all ain't from here, are ya? So I didn't know I'd lost that much of my accent. Anyway, when I go to call a dance, the first thing I want to find out is the strength of the floor. And if I was going to call a plus dance, I definitely wouldn't walk in and say head square through 4 and spin chain and exchange the gears. Might not work. But let's just say, for instance, at this particular tip, my goal is to use cast off 3/4. Well, I know for a fact that if I from 0 lines call pass through, wheel and deal, double pass through, put the centers in, cast off 3/4, I'll have about a 98% success, maybe 100%. But if I call from any other formations, it starts to diminish, so that I try to build up to it. I know that when I call cast off 3/4 motion waves, that's pretty easy. I won't have too much of a problem with it. But if I, from 0 lines, call pass through and cast off 3/4, my success rate is not going to be that high. So I would probably use a lot of helpers, like pass through. Now centers, you're going to be walking out, you're going to be turning the ends. And what seems to be the hardest one of all is from a 2-face line. And it doesn't matter whether it's a plus dance or a mainstream dance. With the exception of the clubs that my son Matt and I call for in the Tidewater area, I don't know any clubs anywhere I can go to and call cast off from a 2-face line and get more than a 50% success rate. So I like to do something like, let's say, couples circulate. Centers trade, cast off 3/4, because if the centers are already moving, it's easier to turn the ends. And the majority of the time, if I want to build up to that, I've got to do the other casts off several times before I even start that. And then once I start it, I will probably have to walk it through. And doing a dance away from my home area, I wouldn't want to workshop more than one figure at all. That would probably be the one I would pick. I don't know about other callers, what their success rate is with that one, but cast off from a 2-face line, it's not good at all. Now then, if you put it's easiest for the girls in the center. If you put the boys in the center, you're starting all over again, because it's very, very difficult to get the boys to walk out and turn the girls, unless you are contra dancers. And contra dancers can do casts off from about any position.
And so Bob just brought up an interesting concept or idea. Cast off in itself, if you are from lines looking one direction, the end is the pivot point where they're casting around that fence post, so to speak, and there's the open gate and they cast away, right? That's sort of how we teach that. And yet, when you get them into mini waves or any other type of a formation, columns or something, the cast is between the hands, not on some end or anyone else. It's right between the hands. And so even when you're teaching it, there's a difference in a cast 3/4 and a cast off 3/4. Okay? Although on our program sheets, the only thing we have on our program sheet is cast off 3/4. So if you wanted to set up diamonds, would you say centers cast off 3/4 or cast 3/4? It says cast off, so we more likely, by proper execution of saying that call, would have to say cast off 3/4. And sometimes if you have two-faced lines between couples or mini waves, there's some difficulty of being able to cast off from there. And who cast off? Because you have very centers could cast off, and then you have on the ends, you have to cast away. And some would even refer to it as a push cast off, to go away from the middle, if you would. And the setting it up, as Bob said, the centers trade into the cast off leads to a better chance of success in that. And one follow-up thing I had in mind with TAC is the idea that in Japan, they are dancing basics for a year. I don't know if everybody's aware of that. They are taught that, and they are focusing on that in a year's time. Then after that year or so, if the people are ready, they can go on and teach mainstream for another year. Okay? And so they're being taught thoroughly. Okay, where here we have to get dancers in our clubs as soon as possible because we want people. And so our clubs say, you have to do an X amount of weeks, teach them, get them into class. And unfortunately, all we do is teach the standard application so they can come dance with us. And then they get clobbered, unfortunately, or could get clobbered.
Well, another thing that I have noticed about the Japanese dancers is that the ladies can, or the majority of the ladies can dance the man's part, and they're all really good dancers.
Hi, my name is Julie Burr. I'm from Munich, Germany. And a question to the guys in front. If I want to use cast off 3/4 and wheel around in the same tip from two-faced lines, my dancers definitely mess up. Because once I convince them to do the wheel around correctly, they want to do the cast of 3/4 in the same way. So is there any hint, a helping word, what I can give them, like a keyword, to convince them not to mix that up?
I think the word is off. And if the word off is the call or the nugget of that name that tells you to shun or to walk away from, to cast off. We cast off our problems. Yesterday we did the fist thing and blowing on our fist that Denise was telling us to do, right? So we're casting off our problems. So you cast off. If you have fishermen in there and they cast their line, they're casting it away from the boat. They don't throw it in or behind them. So you cast away from something. And what's another call where we do off? Peel off. Now I realize that's coming later into plus, but peel off is another example of a word where you go away from people. Not, if you only say you go left, you'd only be half right. You'd be half correct. If the dancers think I go right, you're only half correct or left. It's always away or always off. So cast off, in my mind, if you emphasize the word what an off is, then you're actually telling them to walk away. Where wheel around is that lefty pivot between the hands action. And that's another key. On wheel around, you don't cast off. You're actually wheeling between the hands to wind up on the exact same piece of floor that you're on, that you started the action. And so that might help somewhat. Yeah, using both of them together, you know you're going to have an element of difficulty right there, because they're very confusing. They can, yeah. So,
I was just going to piggyback a little bit on what Bob was saying. For the cast off 3/4, whether I'm doing that from lines facing out or the two-face lines, the next call is always up to the middle and back, because somebody usually inevitably turned the wrong way and are facing backwards. So, and then I tell them right up front that the next call will be up to the middle and back all the time. And then I'll call it again later on, another 5-10 minutes down the road, and they know they're facing, and I'll purposely ask, and what's the next call? And then that couple turns around again, and eventually they start to understand that, and that works from either formation.
Oh, 1, 2. Betsy Gotta from New Jersey. Building on the cast-off 3/4 from lines facing out. One of the ways I've found to build it up is to have lines of 4. Say, put all the girls in the middle. Have the girls pass through. Take hands with the nearest boy, cast off 3/4. Have the centers pass through again. Centers move forward, cast off 3/4. And because the reason that centers in, cast off 3/4 works so well is because the centers have momentum. They move forward to the in, to squeeze in, and then they can move forward without breaking body flow. If you have facing lines and have the centers pass through, then you have different hands. You bring them around again in that inverted line and have the centers pass through. They're all facing out, but the centers have the momentum to carry them to go forward.
Isn't it fascinating? It is to me. I think it's fascinating when, if you have lines looking out, the cast off, the pivot point's on the end. But if you have inverted lines, the cast off, the pivot point is between the hands. And if you don't realize that when you're teaching, cast off becomes a problem, because if you can't relay that fact or analyze it, know that pitfall ahead of time, then you're going to create problems on the dance floor. So you want to be aware of the problems before you get to them. And that's one of the interesting things, where that pivot between the hands or pivot between the ends. Which one do I do and use? Which is kind of interesting. Another thing that is a fascinating discussion, even as we're doing here, is that in Europe and in Japan and most of those places, what over here we have a sub-program, for the lack of another word, if you will, that is becoming more popular, called dancing by definition, or DBD. Now, over there they don't have that. It's over here in North America, and mostly here in the United States, where we're getting this DBD. And to the point where there's places and festivals where they have separate halls just for DBD now, where if I was in a DBD room calling a dance, a DBD type dance, that's how they dance in Europe. There is no DBD. It is all DBD in many ways. They build up to that point, and it's fascinating. But we have comments, please.
Hi, Julie Burr again, Germany. I'm sorry, Tim, but we have DBD. Our DBD means we fractionalize the calls. This is where you call 2/3 of the past the ocean, and expect the dancers to know that. We expect them in DBD dances that they know the definitions written by CALLERLAB exactly.
So in the U.S., let me just qualify the statement. In the U.S., we have DBD that where people are dancing extended applications of calls. In Europe, the extended applications are not just the extended application of the calls, but now a fractionalization of the calls, which would be extreme DBD if we were to offer such here in the States. We're talking about the degree of difficulty being from 0 to 10, 10 being most difficult. They're doing 10s. Our DBD here might be a 5 still, because when we're talking about DBD, we're talking about a variation of the call, maybe a fractionalization of the call, or we're definitely talking about arrangement differences and formation differences. Here in the States, DBD becomes mostly arrangement differences and formations differences to a point. When we start dealing with fractionalizations like swing through once and a quarter, or do something and one more, then those become really extreme applications of the calls.
That's what I was going to touch on. Randy Doherty, he just said swing through once and a half. They do that in Europe, Japan, without blinking an eye. Swing through once and a quarter. Left swing through once and a quarter. In America, the people would throw tomatoes at you. Over there in Germany, wheel around once and a half or wheel around once and a quarter. That's how much, when they've got a year's worth of time to teach their dancers, that's how much depth they go into. A wheel around once and a half, from a left two-face line, where's that going to put you? How is that similar to the cast-off call? You were asking about how do you do that, those kinds of things. You could maybe try to do it from a right face, two-face line, wheel around once and a half, and that's the same as what? The cast-off call. But if you're in the other kind of two-face line, it's not the same. So point those kinds of things out to your German dancers.
In Japan, as a German lady said, we don't have also, we do have a also DVD, but DVD means, as Tim said, mostly like a 10-point side. Like for instance, like everybody from Rise of 4, everybody passed through, and ladies run and roll, do a coordinate, this kind of things. This is the so-called the DBD in Japan. So that's just like past the ocean, 3/4 kind of things. This is called DBD, but like a scoot back once and a half. This is a extended mainstream call.
So does everybody understand that, what we're getting at? Our DBD, the standard DBD that we're offering here in the States, is just normal dancing in Europe. Because we're talking about arrangement changes and formation changes, a few. But when we get into over there, we have extreme applications being used and formations that might be challenging. The T-bone approaches, TAC was just talking about for coordinate, and the different fractionalizations. So it's really interesting. So building up choreo in Japan, they do it through their lessons. Here in the States, we have to do it at our dances because it's not being taught as thoroughly as they do across some of the other areas outside this region.
Right, and so as we're talking about all the way around, it's in order to build up anything, you first need to understand where the building blocks are, not just understanding where the standard position is or where the standard place that you put the call is, but why is it standard? I remember when the standard applications book first came out, I think it was half sachet was listed as there was no standard application for it, because at the time nobody was using it to speak of, so they couldn't find what would in theory be normal. They just assumed it was girl on the left, boy on the girl on the right, boy on the left, and that's where it was. But as we moved on, standards have changed over the amount of time since that book has come out, and what we do today is different than what we did 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and so forth. So that standard is constantly moving. How you handle that in your teaching environment, I think Tim was talking earlier about teaching square through and how you would work up to 4 boys in the middle. And again, it's a different aspect. When I teach square through, the first place I teach is 4 boys in the middle. I do that because, to me, up through that point, every time a boy has come in touch with a girl, he tries to turn her. I keep sending girls at him, he keeps turning them around, and that just seems to be where he's ingrained. So I take 4 boys, put them in the middle. They don't want to turn that other guy around, so they're going to listen more to the actual going around the building, to Tim's point, and getting that magic number and getting in there and figuring out where they need to go. Then I get them out of there, and I put the girls in. And I usually do the boys first because, generally speaking, again, up to that point, most of the girls have been doing the work. They've been chaining, they've been going back and forth, they've been going in, they've been all these other things. I put the boys to work, so the girls take a break and they get to see that. So I try to take that pitfall away. But that's going back to the class level, figuring out where that mistake is, why it's there, and is there a way to create or to stop that mistake from the get-go. Can I help them be better when they're moving forward? And understanding what is standard, where that difficulty is, because if you don't really analyze it and understand where that is, everything that the panel's been talking about building that choreographic difficulty up through your dance or through the years, is really a moot point. You really have to understand why it's hard and where it gets there and how to move from that point. You guys have any other additions you want to throw? Oh, he was pointing at you, Bob.
And any other questions that or comments that you can add? Anybody else? We've got a lot of knowledge in the room even. So is there any other comments? Have you come up across with some choreo build-up ideas that you'd like to share even with the panel here?
Or similar to Julie's comment, something that you've been trying to put together and you feel that you keep stumbling on the same thing. Maybe a fresh pair of eyes would help you find a different way around any particular issue you had.
I think I said the wrong thing on the Pass the Ocean. I said I think Pass the Ocean 3/4. 3/4? No, couldn't do that. 2/3 Pass the Ocean. Yes, excuse me.
Is everybody aware what a 2/3 past the ocean is?
I want to put one of the 4 panelists on the spot here and tell me their logic. If we were going to want to call Zoom, where would be the standard? Where's the little bit harder, and then really what's really hard? And would you be, as a goal, maybe trying to work up to Zoom 1.5 or something like that? So you guys can work as a team. You have 2 minutes.
What are you looking at me for? Bob.
Okay, the question would be, what would be the hardest formation to... Well, I think usually, at classes when I first start to teach Zoom, I'll have something like the heads star through and then explain centers, ends, how they roll back, how they... trailing couple moves up, and etc. And do that with boys in the middle, girls in the middle, and once they're doing that pretty well, then start having them do a double pass through, which seems to be a lot more difficult position for them to do a Zoom for some reason or other than if you're doing them at the first formation. So if you have a star through in the middle, or you have 4 boys in the middle and do a double pass through and call a Zoom, it'll work a lot better if you have just a boy and a girl in the lead. So, And one that I haven't seen and don't ever use, but from promenades. I have seen years ago a couple of callers that I can remember would call Zoom from a promenade. That's very difficult for whoever is in the center, but not difficult for the ends if they've ever done it before.
I think Zoom 1.5 must be considered, where you call from, like a parallel ocean wave. You can do Zoom, but center part is just a crash, on the way. So I think, as Bob said, finish double pass-through or before double pass-through, Zoom 1.5 could be, okay for mainstream for Japanese. But situation the double pass situation, you have a different, ocean wave, right hand ocean wave, the left hand ocean wave mixed up. So you can do like any hand swing through something like that. It is also very important to how do you get out of such kind of formation. And also, I'd like to do Zoom 1.5 from column, left hand or right hand column. So I think it's easier for you when we do a Zoom 1.5 from columns, so you can have a two-face lines. So yes, it's easier for easier from columns. But I think we should call 1.5, not like a Zoom half, because it's so quick. But I'd like to call Zoom 1.5 because it's a longer. I'd like to give the dancers a little bit longer, a time of thinking. So from columns, Zoom 1.5, or if we could set up a column. Inside, inside the column of 4 is like a boys or girls, same sexes. We could do a centers Zoom, center boys Zoom 1.5, or center girls Zoom 1.5 too. So
Yeah, similar.
Let us finish and we'll do that.
We can do that for
Yeah.
you. To Randy's point, when I start with Zoom, I try to make sure that they understand that a Zoom is a 2-person call, because when we call it, it looks like a 4-person call, and it's not. So they need to understand that concept that it's 2. There's one in front, there's one in back. That's usually when I'm introducing my leader versus trailer, so I get to define that. Similar to Bob, if I can, I might set them up with boys in the middle or girls in the middle, just so I'm dealing with the same sex. And I guess it's an age thing, but I always call it my Star Wars call. I said, this is the Star Wars call. What ends up happening is if you get lost and I say Zoom and you don't get out of there, what ends up happening is the trash compactor comes in, those 4 people from the outside, and Luke Skywalker, somebody's trapped in the middle, desperately trying to get out of there, because it happens. You say Zoom, 3 people get out, 1 person is running around and trying to figure out why 4 other people are closing in on them. So it gets a joke, and it gets them to see what's going on, and they remember to get out of there, or they laugh at the one person that ultimately does get stuck in the middle. Then we go through the double pass-through, and again, similar to what Bob was saying, why is it more difficult? It's more difficult because as I'm turning around this time, somebody else is turning and coming in the other direction. And again, what I said earlier, it's easy to deal with, and you want to play with the person who you've got eyeballs with because they're coming at you, right? They're there. Hi, smile at them, give them a hand. But the reality is you need to ignore them, because that's not the person that you're playing with in that call. So you need to know that. So I tell them that ahead of time. Then I move them into, I'll put them into a 2-face line, and I'll exaggerate the Zoom to the point of it's a 2-person call. So I've got boys on the end, girls in the middle, and make the boys stop and figure out where's that other boy. I don't care if I'm here and Gloria's back there facing the other way and I say Zoom, I got to run 50 feet and she's got to turn around and run 50 feet. It's 2 people. So the boys Zoom to a chain down the line because the girl's going to help them. Girl's going to find them after a while. But I'll Zoom them once or twice. I'll zoom them half zooms from a double pass-through formation, peeling them out. Again, because if you're peeling out, it's easier, and having them hang on to somebody. And ultimately, I probably stop at columns. And I agree to Randy's point earlier, a left-handed column for a zoom with the boys in the front, if you're working it, is easier than a right-handed column. And again, always ask yourself, why is that the case? Because if you zoom with the boys as a lead, or you do a half a zoom from the boys in the lead on a left-handed column, they're going to end in a very nice, regular, right-handed ocean wave with the boys on the end where they're comfortable. Whereas if you do it from a right-handed column, you're going to put them in left-handed waves where they are not as comfortable. So always ask yourself why it would be in one case or the other.
Yep. And I am definitely ditto with everything that was said, and especially the last part here Ted said, wherever you can get them to where they end normal, then you're going to have a better success rate. And you could say, hey, you're in a normal line. If they're wandering or floundering around, they can find one and be able to resolve better. So I totally agree with that. And then we start getting into more, well, if I'm teaching, am I going to teach this 0 through 10 in my class? You don't have enough time. You just don't have enough time. I'd like to be able to, but time constraints only allow me to show it from maybe a couple of these places. It might be from the double pass through, the completed double pass through, and maybe the left-handed column. But going from there, you're going to have the two-face lines or the waves where you can get the ends do it. That might be something you show as you're dancing along with clubs and you're working your way. Again, the build-up, not just at one dance. It could be a whole season where the goal is I want to be able to finally say, ping pong circulate, boys go twice and the girls zoom. Okay? All right? That might be the goal. I'm certainly not going to do that the first time out of bat. And I'm going to build up to that, and it's sometimes a whole season to maybe have to be able to do that, to be able to see the centers doing that tandem type zoom approach. Okay, so let's get up our squares like was suggested here. I think Barbara asked, so if we could get a square going and
guy. We got a guy. Oh, that's going to mess me all up. I can't do that. No, actually, do we have a boy for Julie, just so that it really, it isn't going to mess me, but I don't, might be easier to just visually see. Yeah, Betsy knows how to do this. Cool. I'll skip the flow part of it and so forth. Again, going back to where I normally go, let's have the head star through. I want to remember where everybody is here. And again, remembering that it's a two-person call. From this setup, it is not that bad. You don't necessarily have to have the 4 boys or 4 girls, because boys are dealing with boys, girls are dealing with girls. So we identify the leader, we identify the trailer, we know the leader's rolling back. I also explain that make sure that you're going to be looking at the same wall through at the end of the call. And the other joke is normally, as the leaders roll back, you'll be standing behind yourself, because that's what's going to happen.
It might help before you even get to teaching Zoom, you teach what leads and trailers are. Because if you start teaching Zoom, and now this is the first time they hear what a leader and a trailer is, now you've compounded the difficulty of this call by asking them to learn something else other than Zoom. They need to know what leads and trailers are prior to this point. Now, we assume you do, but he's explaining that this is the leader, this is the trailer for the dance action. And somewhere along the line, that has to be taught earlier.
Right. If it wasn't taught earlier, it definitely needs to be taught at least here. You can't just say the person in front or the person behind. So from here, we'll have everybody Zoom. Someday this will be all videoed, Randy, and then you'll get those things on there. And then, well, of course, we'll zoom again, or as everybody else, we resume, right? So they've had the chance to do it at this point in time, a couple different spots. Double pass through. So again, the difficulty here is when the lead rolls back, it looks, even though they don't know it yet, like a clover leaf. You got that other person coming at you. You maybe want to hold on to them instead. How many people have done this call, and instead of being here, you've now got a head couple looking in instead of standing behind the people behind yourself? So by the comment early, you're standing behind yourself, reminds them that where they're going to be, and I tell them to ignore the other ones. Everybody zoom. How did we get Randy in the square? That's what I want to know. Once again, everybody zoom. Perfect. And could we have California twirl? I will normally, if I'm going to do something in class where I'm just going to take them a little spot, I will say something to the tune of, put your thinking caps on or get ready for it, particularly in the class, to get them somewhere here. So everybody, let's do half a zoom. So the leaders roll back, hang on to whatever's there. And you just hang on for dear life is basically what I'm telling them at this point in time. And then a quick easy out, depending on who knows what's going on. Everybody hinge, centers, California twirl. Now they're half sashayed, but they've probably been in half sashayed lines at some point in time. So it's a semi more comfortable. Everybody pass through and do a U-turn back just to make life simple. So get them somewhere very quickly out of the inverted lines. Usually this is the first time that they've seen, from me anyways, an inverted line. So they get a little nervous, explain that it's there, it's legal, it's good, nobody got hurt, where life is wonderful. From here, again, as we're talking, I would probably have built up to left hand touch of quarters at some point in time, where they've found their left hand. They bring it with them on a regular basis at this point. They know life is good. Left touch 1/4. This kind of a setup, again, is a good one because the boys are in front, girls are in back. It's easier to talk to the genders to make sure they know where they're going. Typical, always ask, who's the lead, boys? Good choice. Yeah, all right, so they know, they make up their mind. Remember that they're standing behind themselves. Girls, you'll be going up to the point of the gentleman in front of you. Boys, you're standing behind yourselves. Zoom. So the boys roll back, girls step up. Everybody still has the left-handed column. Life is good, right? One more time. Everybody zoom. Between Randy and Carl, I don't know who's giving me more trouble here from the particular thing. And then they're doing a fine job at it, I must say. All right. And then at this point in time, we'll get to the half a zoom. Everybody, let's do half of a zoom. Boys roll back, hang on to the girls. Girls find each other. And they're normal. The waves are normal. It's very comfortable from here. Swing through. Boy, run around the girl. And what I didn't mention before is, boys, identify yourselves. Remember that when we're talking about a zoom, it doesn't matter how far apart you are. So the trailing boy is easy because he's looking at the back. The lead boy is the boy that can't find the other boy because he doesn't know where he is, but he does now. So let's have the boys, if you can find it in your enough room here, zoom. The lead boy goes all the way back. He's got to find that other girl, face the same way she is. Life is good. And I always try to do it twice to give everybody a chance to do both. One more time, boys zoom, chain down the line. So the girls are going to end up turning. They'll find a guy because they know they need to be turned by a guy. Even if he's a little wrong or if he's facing the wrong way, they'll usually help him out and get him to where they need to be from that point on time. Anybody else want to take it from here?
So why not a right-hand call?
Touch a quarter. Sure. Good point. You want to still have the boys be the ones rolling back? We'll try this. Everybody zoom once. Girls roll back. Boys go forward. Now I don't know if he's playing. Or all right, never mind. There you go. And then we'll go back and do what we did before, which was the half a zoom. So do half a zoom. Boys roll back, hold on to left hands. Girls are in the middle. When you normally, in my mind, again, I'm going back to my class, I'm debating my own. The first time that most people get the left-handed waves or get them pretty standard to left-handed is from what call? Dixie style. Thank you, Bob. So, and Dixie style is going to normally put the boys where? In the middle. So, generally speaking, when you have a left-handed wave, I'm thinking probably 80% of the time, boys are more comfortable in the middle. They're going to be in this action very quickly and then out of it for some particular reason. So I personally, again, this is a TED scale. You can argue it all you want. I would prefer to have the boys would be more comfortable in the middle, but I think a left-handed wave is uncomfortable for a lot of dancers right away. If I had to do this, again, the first thing from here is to trade the ladies. So girls trade, girls run around a boy, to get out of there, bend it, and be normal as soon as possible. But that's where we go. Would I? Yeah, you might work up to that. Yeah, that's a good point. Did you see how that would go? Well, I had the girls trade, so they... Yeah, again, I would have the girls trade first to identify themselves and run and bend the line, and we're here. And then to Randy's point, if you went this way, touch 1/4.
I don't think I've ever done half a zoom, so that's why.
Well, we just did it like 3 times. Oh, okay. I'm wondering if you had really short-term memory or anything. All right. So from here, if we did it again, everybody zoom, girls roll back, boy forward. We still have a column. This time, boys rolling back, half a zoom, chain down the line. Girls now know they're going to trade because why? I already traded them a second ago, so they've already found it. So now a chain down the line feels like you're doing something harder. What, were they doing anything really harder than they just were? No, not really. But the girls have been able to find each other, and you move forward, and that's building another step. Anybody else?
No, I just want to add, I think it's great because even if the guys are lost, that chain down the line is going to resolve it. They get found. They were lost, but now they're found. So, yes, we have a question. We need the question from the microphone, if that's all right.
Gloria Vivier from Massachusetts. And would you just set it up so you would do the Zoom from the waves, please? Thank you.
I'm just messing with Gloria. We were in the same class. Tim, wake up. It's your turn. Really? She would like to see, you mentioned Zoom from waves.
Randy was talking to me while the question was being asked. I apologize.
For the tape, that was Randy Doherty, brother of Dee Dee. All right, she was interested in seeing it from waves. That was mentioned earlier. She wanted ocean waves, I think.
So everybody passed the ocean then, and we're in a situation where you can have the end zoom. I wouldn't say everybody zoom because, as Tack had pointed out, and Bob, that there's a collision that you get. Yeah, technically, it could be done, but judgment-wise, is it good? No, it really isn't, because the people in the middle are going to get all into traffic, and I just wouldn't recommend doing it. Wouldn't recommend it. All right, but we can have the ends do it while the centers are doing something. So let's have the boys zoom, girls trade, and it's still similar to the idea that Ted had where you do the chain down the line or you do dance actions to get them there. So I would build from where Ted had and then come to the wave, because you've got a great get out from the two-face line. From the wave here, I can't call chain down the line unless I'm in a left-handed wave, and I can do that. So will the boys and the girls half hash get to the other side sachet way? Get over there. All right. So now if I have the girls zoom, girls do a zoom. And in the middle, we have boys in the middle. Yeah, not at mainstream, but at plus, you can chain down the line from here. But let's say we have it set up with a left swing through. Let's do a left swing through. And we have a left-handed wave, and we have the girls in the middle. So we still have the boys on the ends. We could say boys zoom, girls start a chain down the line. And here's the girl, just as Ted was working with two-face lines a minute ago and doing that. Okay? Let's do this. If we're where we set up right now, because are we in a 0 box with the corner out of sequence. So that's as if I said head square through, slide through, and do a right and a left through. So from here, everybody do a touch a quarter, and then a half zoom gives you an Alaman left. And then you could come back and square your sets. Square your sets, please, for a second, if you don't mind. Promenade to wherever it gets you to home. Let's have the heads pass the ocean. I alluded to that other thing, and Randy was asking me during that question if it's something that would be needed to show. Maybe not, but this is a bullet that you don't want to have loaded in a gun if you don't know how to use it. If the men were to slide away from the setup, the arrangement for a second, the formation, just kind of slide away. See how you have the girls in tandem? And yes, they can zoom. The lead girl will take the trailing girl's place, and trailing girl. So ladies, do a zoom. Ladies, do a zoom again, just because we're going to have you do something else in a minute. Okay? Boys, come on back in and join us. And so from here, you can say, ping pong circulate. Boys, do it twice. Girls, zoom. And come back. Okay? Now, the reason why I have the boys do that twice is because where they're standing now, if I said girls zoom, there's a traffic problem. See, because that girl in the middle can't roll out because there's a man in the way. But if you have the men moving and getting out of the way, that frees up the ladies to do that particular action. So it works well with that combination. Again, it's building up to that. You want to see it again? Okay, they want to see it again. I'm afraid of the bullet we're providing. All right, so look, ping pong circulate. Boys do it twice. Girls zoom. The boys are out of the way. They're doing their second one, and then they come into the places they finish the second ping pong. And the zoom works, okay? Everybody, linear cycle is what's going to be done. We're back to a squared set.
And then we're getting close on time. We're actually a little bit over, but is there any other questions that you have for the panel before we break for lunch? Sure. One more question from the floor.
I saw this one time, and I'm sorry, my name is Jeannie Browning from Georgia, and if you can go in and face your corner, I saw this, and when the call was made, I thought, oh, they can't do that, and everybody did it. Pass through and center zoom, and that was a call. And the centers went around. I'm just letting you know. This is what I saw one time. And they did go around, and I was shocked at it.
Yeah. So this is, Jeannie, this is a gimmick. This would be a poor use of the call. It's a gimmick if you can get it to a get out to an Alaman left or a swing or something along that line. You know, and their gimmicks are fun, but technically sometimes gimmicks aren't accurate, but they lead or lend to a showmanship side of being able to use that. Just be aware that if you were to say centers zoom in some places, they would pass through. So and do not ever call that way and want that.
Unless you were in Japan or Germany. And you wanted them to pass through. One other quick comment, Randy Doherty. Make sure you know your definitions really, really good, because if you look in your definitions, zoom from a promenade is called a gimmick. It's not legitimate to call zoom while you're promenading, and it says right in our definite definitions that it's a gimmick. It should be sparingly used, okay? Yes, you do have to designate heads or sides, but it's still a gimmick, okay?
All right, thank you. All right, guys, if there's no more questions, I'd like to thank the panel, Tim Marriner, Bob Worley, Ozaki.
Nice big hand to Ted, too.
Thank you for coming. Enjoy your lunch.